and welcome to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe, alongside Ronnie Dahl in the studios of 89.3 Lakes FM and Civic Center TV, our flagship TV and radio stations here on the Megacast family of stations. In addition today, as always, also on Comcast, Channel 15, and AT&T Channel 99. We are on Birmingham Area Municipal Access in Birmingham, Bingham Farms, Beverly Hills, and the village of Franklin, and 88.1 WBFH, The Biff. And on Facebook Live today, joined by our Facebook partner, the Orchard Mall. And we thank Kelly Woodley and her entire team over there at the Orchard Mall for joining us on today's edition of the Oakland County Megacast as we go through all of the latest headlines in the past 24 hours regarding COVID-19 and so much more, and discuss a number of other topics with interesting guests throughout the day. Joining me, as always, in the studio today is Ronnie Dahl.
Hey, Tyler, did you go to the planetarium when you were a young kid?
I did a couple times, yes.
So I have this really cool app on my phone. It's called Skyview. And last night was a beautiful night. Well, actually the night before. So full moon, it's crystal clear out. You can see all the stars. So the dog wanted to go for a walk about 2:30 in the morning.
As always.
And so I decided to take the dog out, but I'm like, oh my gosh, the sky is beautiful. Let me get out my Skyview app. It's like being in a real life planetarium, right? So you're walking, you can see everything. It's really cool. The only problem is I wasn't paying attention, totally tripped and fell into a huge snowbank.
Oh, no.
And I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness it was in front of a house without a Ring camera, so it wasn't recorded. And I think about that because, you know, me in this chair, I'm like, I'm gonna fall off. I'm gonna fall off. Yesterday I managed to stay put in the chair because I had heels on, so I could kind of put my heel in the, bracket down at the bottom there. But today I don't, so. Anyway, that's my story.
Well,
welcome to Friday.
Yeah, well, happy Friday indeed, falling into the snowbank. One great way to start your Friday off. But have you heard of this app though, Skyview? I have not heard of it, no, but it sounds very interesting now. I'll take a look.
Amazing. It is so amazing. And for anyone out there with kids, it's a great way to get them interested in the sky and the world around us.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I'll have to check that out, and maybe the next time we have some clear skies at night, I'll have to take a look at that. And, of course, as we've now learned, watch out for snowbanks in the process.
Yeah, that's Tyler's way of saying you're a dork. It's okay,
Listen,
Tyler.
If you knew all of the ways that I have clumsily fallen into things that I have no business falling into, we'd have a half-hour comedy show here.
Hey, I managed to keep hold of the dog, though, so that was
that's good. That is good news.
We could jump into the headlines today. The Michigan Senate approves $2 billion with the B on their COVID plan, but they are holding off on releasing billions more. The Michigan Senate approved a $2 billion COVID-19 relief plan on Thursday with money for schools, testing, and vaccine distribution, but intense debate focused on Republicans' decision to hold off on allocating billions more in federal funding. So this has been a big fight in Lansing. Back in January, Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer proposed a $5.6 billion relief plan with about $5 billion of the money coming from the federal government, but the GOP-controlled legislature has decided to delay authorizing many of the dollars in order to have continued oversight over how that money is being spent. The Senate spending plan now has to go to the House. This has been such a big fight in Lansing, and it's going to be interesting to see how they resolve it.
Yeah, it's going to continue to be a fight, and it's causing some frustration as we've heard in recent days from particularly our school superintendents who are waiting for some critical funding for our schools in the state of Michigan, and that's definitely a frustration for them. But this relief plan, critical right now as schools are trying to prepare for the future. What happens when they go back to in-person learning? How is the funding that they have lost over the course of the pandemic by having to take on other means and other projects in order to maintain their education? How is that going to affect their bottom line? These dollars need to get to them as soon as possible.
So we have two sides to this argument. You obviously have the Republicans who are controlling the purse strings right now. And with that, it's kind of like our parents, right? Hey, here's your allowance, but in order to get your allowance, you have to do A, B, C, D, and E. And that's kind of what the Republicans are trying to pull right now. One of the things being is that they want the governor to reduce some of the restrictions here within the state of Michigan, namely surrounding so many of our restaurants. We're hearing again this morning another big restaurant is going to be closing. Andiamo's in Dearborn is going to be closing its doors due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the fallout from that. And so the Republicans are kind of trying to use this as, a leverage. But on the other side, people are saying we need this money. Well, what about down the road? We're going to probably need money down the road as well. I love the way the politicians love to throw out these numbers. It's the federal government money. It's still our tax dollars. It's not free money, people.
Yeah, it all is coming from somewhere, and all the more reason why they need to be frugal in how they spend it, but also be smart in how they spend it, and put the money where the need is right now, because eventually that money has to be paid back. Eventually we do have to answer for those dollars going out into the systems that be. And because of that, you want to make sure that it's going to something that's as much worthwhile as possible, as helping as many people as possible, because these are not tiny numbers. This is a major, major chunk of change, billions of dollars. And so you don't want that going somewhere that it doesn't absolutely have to be, or spending any more money than you absolutely need to, especially when we're still in pretty uncertain times and we don't know what the financial impact of the pandemic is going to be long term.
What's so hard about this, there are so many people that actually really still need this money. So many of these businesses to keep their doors open, but they're not able to get it, or at least not get enough of it to help them sustain their businesses, to keep them afloat during this time. And it seems like there are some companies somewhere along this pipeline that are probably getting pretty rich right now off of all this government money, our tax dollars. So we'll keep a watch on that and see what happens out of Lansing. We talked about this next headline a little bit yesterday with a superintendent for the West Bloomfield School District. Michigan education officials appear poised to ask the federal government to allow the state to use benchmark assessments, tests that gauge academic improvement at multiple points during the school year to meet the U.S. Student testing rules. Those benchmarks assessments, which Michigan schools are required to administer at least twice during the school year, would be administered instead of state exams. State Superintendent Michael Rice said this statement that the Michigan Department of Education will reach out to federal education officials to share the value of the benchmark assessments. Rice's statement came several hours after the U.S. Department of Education announced states must administer the federally required standardized test this year, but schools won't be held accountable for the results. The administration said states could give shorter, remote, or delayed versions of the exams. So many different sides to this. Some people are saying, hey, we need to somehow or another figure out a level to know where the kids are on their learning curve throughout this pandemic. However, Superintendent Hill said they have other ways to get that information.
Yeah, and so is Superintendent Gutman from the Walled Lake Consolidated School District on Wednesday. Same sentiment, that they have the ability within their own systems and within the state systems and associations they're involved with to do these kinds of assessments internally and measure how student performance is lining up to the curriculum in each district by each district and to the state requirements. And I've heard from educators in my own family and people that I'm connected to through other parts of my life and throughout life who are educators who have the same sentiment. Why are we taking time out of educating these kids at a time where they're already struggling to maintain flow in their education as it is, to take these standardized tests when we have other standardized tests that we're already giving them on a regular basis to measure their performance and see where we need to go. So there still are a lot of questions with this, especially when these test results really aren't going to be judged at a higher level. It's really just seemingly a test for the sake of testing.
Well, and it's like Superintendent Hill said yesterday, one of the issues, they have to make plans though right now to go ahead and administer this test. So if the feds don't agree to, those to the request, then they still have to make the plans to be able to administer the test, and that's taking up time and resources.
Yeah, it's taking up time and resources to plan for if they need to take the test, and then if they do take the test, they have to execute those plans. They have to delay their educational plans. And on the other side, if it ends up being, well, we're going to make it optional, you don't have to administer these tests to the kids, then you've wasted that time, you've wasted that money that you already don't have to throw away on planning for that. And on top of that, you have had teachers that have put in extra time on top of all the work they're already doing to modify their lesson plans around the fact that they may or may not have to administer a test on a given number of days.
So there's going to be a new ad campaign launched with the goal of reminding people why you need to get the vaccine. Prepare for an onslaught of ads reminding us of all the things we miss about life before the pandemic. Hugs, going to church, family gatherings, and hanging with friends, and information about how COVID-19 vaccines can bring them back. The ad campaign from the Ad Council will include more than $500 million in donated media and talent. It launched Thursday, will slowly change as the landscape of who's eligible for the vaccine and what questions they have shifts. The ads are aimed at the 40% of Americans who haven't yet made up their minds about getting vaccinated. The Ad Council focused on in-depth focus groups and surveys to try to understand what questions people had and why their worries were there. What are you concerned about? Why are you not getting it? So those, I started to see the ads already last night on TV. Talking to strangers is my big one. Hugs and strangers.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of these as we try to convince more people to get the COVID-19 vaccine, those reminders of what's normal. I think it's going to be a situation where some people are going to watch us and be like, what are we getting back to normal now? Is it over? Are we finally out of this? And I think beyond that, it's going to take a lot more than an ad campaign, I think, to convince the people that are not yet convinced to get the COVID-19 vaccine, or at least consider it, to do so. And I don't think necessarily hearing from a bunch of celebrities and experts in the field of medicine is necessarily going to change their minds. It's going to take a lot more. This is a good effort. It could certainly help, but is it going to be what changes for these 40% of minds that are not yet made up on whether or not to get the vaccine? I don't know that that's the case, and $500 million could probably be used in a better way right now.
Well, we've had these ad campaigns. I mean, right. We play them every commercial break. So I think what's going to get people to change their mind? Hey, do you want to fly?
Right.
You need to have proof of your COVID negative test, or you are going to have to show that you had the vaccine. You want to go to a sporting event? Show us your vaccine. There are so many ads, or not ads, but apps that are in development right now that are going to be used just like that. Do you have Clear, by the way?
I do not, no.
So Clear is like a program so that when you can kind of do a pre-screening, and it can be used like when you go to the airport or sporting events to get into the Tigers game. So you've already agreed to certain measurements beforehand for like a higher clearance type thing. So it's an app, and then basically what's going to happen is, like, through a program such as that, you're going to show that, hey, I've had the vaccine. It's going to scan it, and you're going to be allowed entrance to some of these places. Because the one thing about showing that you had a negative COVID-19 test, some of the tests, like, you can still test positive up to, like, 3 months, I think, afterwards. So those tests really aren't a good benchline or a good benchmark to be able to get access into some of these locations.
Yeah, we've used the terminology before that these tests are a snapshot in time. I mean, you can test negative on one day, and then a few hours later after you take the test, you could be exposed to COVID-19, and a couple of days later it could be active in your body, and you could then be in a position to test positive. And I was watching one of the major news networks last night, and they did an interview with Dr. Anthony Fauci, and they asked him some of these questions. Do you think that as we get more of the general population to be vaccinated, as we get closer to that 70% benchmark, that herd immunity, and people have an even greater desire to get back to some normal things, that we could see situations where institutions like restaurants and like sporting events and even governments at the state level could require, well, you can have X capacity of people who are vaccinated, but you have to have a separate area for people that are not vaccinated. And he had even said there's nothing necessarily in the works for that right now, which, believe what you want to believe with that they're not planning anything for that scenario, but that he does believe that as we get further into the vaccination process, that these kinds of things and these kinds of apps may become more common as businesses and as parts of society and people especially want to get back to some semblance of normalcy, and have the ability to do so safely by being vaccinated and being around other people who are also vaccinated.
But we have to keep in mind, too, once you get vaccinated, it doesn't mean that you can't get COVID again, or that you also can't have COVID and not know it and still transmit it to other people. So it's going to be interesting this next year. I almost feel like the next 6 to 8 months is going to be more interesting than the last, because this last year has been about shutting down and stopping the spread. But now, how is that reopening going to look? And what about the people who are the holdouts saying, I'm not getting vaccinated? I mean, we already have a huge population of people that don't want to get their kids vaccinated.
Right.
So this is going to be, I think, really a big issue, and a lot of legal issues involved in this over the next, I would say, 6 to 8 months. So we'll have to see how it all plays out and how it impacts us all on a day-to-day basis, because I will say a lot of my friends are saying I got vaccinated just for my friends, so those businesses can reopen. So that's kind of that belief that you're doing it for the next person.
Yeah, we kind of had that shell shock over the first several months of the pandemic of what does life look like distanced from one another? What does life look like with restaurants shut down, with people working at home, with us not going out and spending extended amounts of time in close proximity to our friends and to our families and to other acquaintances and doing things that we do in normal life. And it was that weird, where do we go from here kind of feeling. I think that's going to have a similar effect as we get out of this pandemic and people begin to reacclimate themselves to life in normalcy and realize what that is in the context of a post-COVID world. And the vaccination process is going to have a huge impact on that. Whether or not these vaccines are able to prevent against the spread of these variants is going to have a big impact on that. And I think this is going to be, as you said, a much more interesting journey as we figure out our way back to normalcy and out of the pandemic than it was going into it.
So you can find those headlines and so much more if you just head over to civiccentertv.com, click on the coronavirus tab. With that, we're going to take a quick break here on the show, and when we come back, we are going to be speaking with an occupational therapist about the craniosacral therapy.
Yes.
It's called CST for short, craniosacral therapy. What exactly is it and why it may be able to help you? That's coming up next on the Oakland County Megacast.
The only way to beat COVID-19 is to face it.
You can't get too comfortable.
You can't forget the danger.
Wear the mask. Wear the mask.
Wear the mask. Wash your hands.
Keep a safe distance.
Especially in the next few months.
You know we'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
Someday.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But not yet.
But not yet.
Consider virtual gatherings for the holidays.
Curbside food orders.
Grocery delivery.
And shopping local. Shop local.
And especially shopping local.
Let's beat this virus. We can if we face it together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together. Together.
For the latest information, visit oakgov.com/COVID.
Perry tested positive for COVID-19. Emma was exposed to a friend who's positive. Willa's waiting on test results. After any contact with COVID-19, or if you test positive, stay home for at least 10 days. If you live with others, keep your distance and wear a mask. Help Michigan contain COVID-19. Visit michigan.gov/containcovid.
COVID-19 has caused many families to fall behind on finances and on groceries. But you're not alone. You shouldn't have to worry about putting food on the table. My Bridges offers access to quality food and income assistance to help families across the state get the food support they need. It's easy to apply and easy to start shopping. Apply for services at michigan.gov/MIBridges. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Welcome back to the Oakland County Megacast. Tension, stress, migraines, we are all feeling the impact of COVID-19. To help relieve the pain, some are turning to craniosacral therapy. To explain more, let's bring in licensed occupational therapist Magda Giro with us here on the Megacast. Thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
Okay, explain to us exactly what is craniosacral therapy.
Yeah, it's a type of therapy that really works with the fascia of the body. And the fascia is like, easiest way to explain it is like the saran wrap that wraps all the muscles, all the organs through the whole body. And like saran wrap, when saran wrap is nice and smooth, it covers our stuff and holds our stuff in our bowls. When it's nice and smooth, the fascia is nice and smooth in the body, it works and functions well as our shock absorber. However, things happen in life, right? We're in accidents, there are birth issues, and that fascia becomes crinkled. What craniosacral does, it applies 2 grams of pressure on the muscle, and it goes right into the fascia and is able to distinguish where there are restrictions. So the simplest way people see restrictions is that it limits to how far an arm moves, how far how far our legs, our hips moves. I work and specialize with women in pelvic, and I also specialize working with children. And with children, it can impact how they eat, how they breastfeed, how they use the muscles of the lips, the tongue, the jaw, how they even acquire the developmental positions they need to acquire, like prone on elbows, crawling, those kind of things. It also impacts children with sensory integration issues and autism. If there's crinkles the children aren't able to process and learn and focus and pay attention, it can cause anxiety in people. And it really brings people to a place where their performance is limited. And I see that really my job is to take their path forward and get them into whatever it is they're committed to and they're destined to do, because their body is fully functioning.
Some people believe that this is an alternative medicine. What do you say to those people and why you believe it works?
I believe it works because there's a significant amount of research behind it, but also in my practice, I have seen people make gains that they haven't been able to make gains before. I have seen children who have restrictions in the occipital base, not be able to focus in school and go from being D students to being, A students and coming in and telling me they got 100%. And for me, that people can, children can go from being D and E students to getting 100% because I released a restriction at the base of their neck. That for me is invaluable. Or if, like I have worked with senior citizens who had breast cancer and there was restriction and scar tissue from surgeries that they had. And as I released the restrictions there where they couldn't lift their arms to take something off a shelf, now they can lift their arms and pull things off a shelf, and that changes the quality of people's life if they can do things independently. And can you imagine if you can't reach for a bowl when you're cooking, you have to ask somebody, and now that you don't have a restriction, you can reach and grab a bowl at the top of your counter. cabinet, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I will say, frozen shoulder syndrome like years ago, and I remember not even being able to wash my hair. It was so painful. It was crazy to go through that, but I use physical therapy. And so what is the difference between what you're doing and a physical therapy session as well?
Yeah, so my approach really works with 2 grams of pressure, where physical therapy is a lot of exercise and strenuous work. And, physical therapy, traditional physical therapy works phenomenally. But craniosacral speeds up the process in which people gain their progress. And it's less invasive and it's less painful, so that people get the results that they are looking for in a shorter amount of time. So it won't take as long to get to where they want to go to.
And so this is done over what, several sessions?
It is. And it really depends. Every person is individual. It really depends how much restriction is in, how many muscle groups is being affected, how many, if it's the whole body, that, if somebody's in an automobile accident, it could be like restrictions through their whole body because, that was such a severe blow. And for some people, it may be really short. It could be anywhere from, 1 or 2 sessions to like there are people with a lot of restrictions that it can be like a 6-month kind of thing that we would work with. And then I also do other things to supplement if I'm working with kids, because kids have a lot of other things that'll be impaired. So I use my occupational therapy skills to bring a holistic view to what's possible for kids and adults.
Magda Giro with us here on the Megacast. She is with the Michigan Craniosacral Therapy. And when would a parent know to take their child to you versus a regular doctor?
Well, you always want to start with your physician first, right? Because that's the head of your medical practice. And then doctors will refer people to occupational therapy and physical therapy. And then some kids get referred, like I have seen kids as young as 10 days old, where they've been referred because of difficulty with feeding off the breast and bottle feeding and failure to thrive. So it's usually, when a doctor sees that a function isn't happening, they will refer to me, and doctors will contact me and ask me, this is what I need done, and I will do a full evaluation and look at all, and then I systematically will hit the places that there's restrictions so that the person can get back to the life. And for me, it's getting people back into the life as fast as I can.
So I was watching videos this morning on the entire procedure, and it's similar to a massage in a way, but it looked like it was such a light touch.
It is. It's very light. So if you placed a penny on your finger and balanced the weight of the penny on your finger, that's how light the touch is. And so it's very, a penny weighs nothing. So it's very light. So what you see is a decrease for people in feeling pain. Sometimes people have so much pain. When you have that kind of light touch, you aren't going to get the severe pain, and as you work on people, the pain gradually goes away, and people can move without any restrictions, raising their arm to grab things or brushing their hair and things like that.
This really is fascinating to me. So are you seeing more and more people right now because of the pandemic?
I am. Because we're removed and I'm in a small office, and people don't have to go into the general hospitals, more people are coming for this kind of therapy because it's providing resolution. And I'm even getting people who have had COVID, and you see the effects that it's done on their bodies and the restrictions it's caused in their breathing. I've worked with people where they can't even take a full breath because of COVID and the restrictions in their lungs. I worked with people who, because of COVID, their thinking process is slow, and it's just frustrating. And as we work on those restrictions in the fascia, in the brain, and in the lungs, people are thinking faster and going back to how they used to be before COVID.
I know that some insurance companies are starting to open up to more of these alternative therapies, but they're still not there quite yet. Is this covered under insurance or no for most people?
If you just do a craniosacral therapy only, it is not covered. What you do is like a modality, like if you go to physical therapy, they do hot packs as a modality, and they do stretches, and that's a modality. If you just use it as modality and complement it with regular occupational therapy activities, then it is covered.
How'd you get involved in this?
I am always really curious about learning, and I stumbled on a class, and I went to the class, and I was able to figure out what was happening in the tissue, and I'm like, gosh, this can't be that I can figure this out. And then I just kept working on it, and then I had the blessing and fortunate ability to adopt my son. And when I went to Guatemala to pick up my son, what I got faced with is a child who had torticollis, who wasn't eating correctly, and my son has been my inspiration to really keep progressing. I'm actually trained and certified at a diplomat level, which is the highest level you can be certified in this. But it was from my son, and always wanting to know, like, how do I make my son better? How do I get his skills to excel? And my son is now 16 years old, and he, plays football, and he's a straight A student, and, to see the success that he is able to do it by using this is just phenomenal. And I just want to pass that on to people and really have kids have that success, and women, and whoever wants to have the success in their life, to do what they're meant to do and not be stopped.
So who should seek this type of therapy?
Yeah, so anytime you have, if we begin with children with breastfeeding issues, children with feeding issues, children with sensory issues, tongue tie, people who have had some kind of automobile accident, have some kind of injury where they have pain. It does work in how children people with anxiety. So it really has a wide encompassing range of what it can provide.
This is again, I'm just fascinated by this. Especially, we want to invite people to go online and Google and watch the video, because it seems like, how is it something that comes across in the videos is simplistic, can help so much in such a wide range of issues, but there is a science behind it.
Completely. Like when it was first being developed by Dr. Upledger, he was a professor at Michigan State University, and they actually invited a chemist to hook people up to electrodes to see how it was changing. And what they noticed, it just kept changing the muscles, and it kept changing the whole landscape of the body and how the body was working through that technology. And since then, there's been hundreds and hundreds of things done in research at Upledger Institute in Florida continues to do the research. And this technique actually has people trained all over the world. Like, it's in Russia, it's in Brazil, it's in Scotland, it's all over the world. And the commitment is really to give this to more people out there.
So you are an occupational therapist. How did you come to merge the two worlds and to really grasp and take hold of the holistic world of the medical field?
Yeah, it was hard because as an occupational therapist, I was trained in tradition. And, like when I first started, it was not accepted by the employers that I was working with. And what really sold me on it was the progress I made with my son. And then as I transferred that to my patients and started working, with them and seeing how fast my patients made progress using craniosacral is what sold me. Because, if people can make progress, their lives change.
And do you think, though, that we're starting to talk more about some of these holistic and alternative medicines out there, that this is going to open up your world even more?
I do. I think that people are really getting knowledgeable about, traditional medicine and holistic medicine. And as they learn about holistic medicine, there are benefits. There are benefits in holistic and traditional, but I think it's the balance of both that will really bring people forward if we use both of them to, the knowledge of both Western and Eastern to really bring things forward.
Right, and as we've been talking too about the vaccine, so many people right now are hesitant about some of the things that we're putting into our bodies. And one thing I think during COVID is, especially when we had that breakdown in the food supply chain, was people are starting to pay more attention to the food and some of the things that we put in our bodies. But we are still Americans, and we want that one quick, fast pill. Let's take a pill and move on with our life and everything is good. But sometimes the answer is just getting back to the basics then.
It really is. If we really take a look at how we treat our bodies, our bodies are wise. They know where things are hurting and where we need to address. But as Americans, we are so fast paced that we ignore our body signs that we need to work on our shoulders or we need to work on our hips. We ignore it until it becomes something very severe, where all of a sudden there's so much pain that we can't walk, or we're stuck in bed because our back hurts so bad. That's when we go, oh, maybe I should do it. And then what you see is, people, especially with adults will come in and do 1 or 2 sessions, go, oh, okay, I feel good. I know I'm not done, but I feel good, and I got to get back out there running.
Like with any kind of therapy, whether it be occupational therapy, physical therapy, psychological therapy, there's no one-size-fits-all solution or method to treatment. So when somebody comes in, because you are interacting with people and treating people of all different ages and all different ailments, what is the process that you go through to understand what they're suffering from, and how does that impact the way that you approach treating them with craniosacral therapy?
So the process, I do a whole body evaluation and I take a look, and then craniosacral works on a lot of things, but there's also being knowledgeable and wise to know the limitations of craniosacral and what it can't address. So when I do an evaluation, I address with people, this is what craniosacral can work on, and this is how I can impact, and this is the difference that I can make. And if I do an evaluation and they don't have restrictions in their body and it's something else, then I refer to the appropriate person that they should see. I provide them with a list of doctors or, whatever it is that they need. Because there are things that obviously, like, you can't go to a cardiologist and expect him to work on your foot. It's, that's not his knowledge base, and that's not what he's supposed to. So it's really knowing the balance again of what my type of therapy can do and what's out there, and being knowledgeable to refer people to what they need, or, getting them complete with what I can provide them.
Well, every person is different, every body is different, and an individual needs to explore what could work for them. With the Magda, how can people find out more about what you do and how to reach you?
If you go to my website, which is www.michigancraniosacral.com, they can read all about what I do. You can you can also call me, and I'll take the time to explain and really go through things with you. And then my number is 248-318-7912. And for me, the first initial call is really about educating you and seeing if I'm the right fit for you. And then, exploring what is possible and going from there.
Well, it is fascinating type of therapy, but it seems like it is also helping a lot of people. And so we appreciate you coming on and educating us about it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here.
Well, thank you for being with us, and we want to say also stay safe and stay healthy and take care of yourself.
You too. Thank you so much.
We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast. When we come back, we'll switch the focus of the conversation just a little bit. Fascinating story on our next guest, talking about literacy and how he was able to be a teacher and not be able to read. That's next on the Oakland County Megacast.
Michigan, we're calling on you to save lives. Don't ignore it. Don't let it go to voicemail. It's urgent. In fact, it's critical. Because if you've been in close contact with someone who tests positive for COVID-19, you may have been exposed to the virus. And you could get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department. So please answer the call to learn how to protect yourself, your family, and friends. We're calling on you to stop the spread of COVID-19, to make it safe to reopen businesses and help Michigan move forward. So if you get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department, you may have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. To protect us all, answer the call. Learn more at michigan.gov/containcovid. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Hi, my name is Kurt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Park's COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
This may seem uncomfortable, but so is being hooked to an IV, sleeping in a hospital bed, and fighting for your life. When it comes to COVID-19, comfort is not as important as saving lives. Wearing a mask can greatly reduce the chance of spreading the virus. So mask up, Michigan, every time you leave home.
Thank you for taking time out of your Friday to be with us here on the Megacast. Our next guest is on a crusade to improve literacy in America. He was a teacher and a millionaire real estate developer, yet he did it without knowing how to read. Then when he was at the age of 48, he had the courage to break his silence and now is on a mission to improve literacy in America. With us now, please welcome to the show, John Corcoran, author and president of the John Corcoran Foundation. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So people should know, I'm sure everyone does know, March, which is right around the corner, is, Reading Awareness Month in honor of Dr. Seuss. Your story is so fascinating to me. How in the world were you able to hide this for most of your life?
Well, it is a long story, and I wanted to, before I answer that question, I want to say that we're talking about the most important civil and human rights issue of this decade, and that is the ability and skill to read, write, and spell. And there's no way you can maximize your fullest potential without those basic skills. And I didn't actualize my fullest potential until I didn't have the opportunity to do that until I was 48 years old. When I went off to school at the age of 6, I was told I was going to learn to read, like my 5 sisters. I came from a loving home. I was told I was a winner. And by the time I was in the 2nd grade, I found out I was in the dumb row, and I didn't know how I got there, and I didn't know how to get out. So that was the beginning of my I call illiteracy in America a form of child neglect and child abuse. And today, if I went to school, I'd be labeled learning disabled, and I'm dyslexic. The good news is that I learned to read at 48, and I went to a public library, and I had a volunteer tutor, and she got me to about the 6th grade level. I thought I died and went to heaven. And I had kept that secret for 48 years. From the dumb row, I was a little boy that had difficulty learning to read, and there's millions of us. And in this country right now, my story is still going on right now, and I think that's what drives my passion to break the cycle of illiteracy in America. And I know we all want to improve the quality of education for everybody in this country. And there's no equal opportunity for anyone if they don't have the basic skills of reading and writing. And that's the language of success in school. By the time you're in the 3rd grade, the first couple of years in school, you go to school to learn to read, and then the rest of your academic career, you read to learn. And so that really puts an arm behind your back. You're not going to succeed. So my experience, I want to tell you a little bit about, not only was I was a teacher that couldn't read, I was a little boy who couldn't read, and I was innocent, and little boys and little girls are innocent. And then by the time I got to the 5th grade, I was passed on, and we're still passing people on that don't get it. We're talking about 64% of our 4th graders in America, across America, in almost every school and school district in America, 64% of our children are not proficient readers. So we have an epidemic here. We have an urgency here. And my story, I guarded my secret. I was so embarrassed and ashamed. It's a shame-based secret. But I was just full of joy when I did learn to read. And I was asked to share, and I do want to point out that I had a volunteer tutor that was a brilliant woman who didn't have any education background, but she thought she didn't think anybody should go through life without knowing how to read. So she took the time to work with me, but I outgrew her skills. You can have a good heart and you can have a good art, but you got to have the science of reading. And if we've done anything right in the last 20 years that gives me hope, is that we now know a lot about how the brain works and how it learns to read. And we do have the science now. We have a gap between what we know and what we do. And I think I'm way off the question.
That's fine.
But John, I'm thinking it must have been exhausting for you to go through life and hide this secret.
Well, I didn't know how exhausting it was until I learned to read. And I said, whoa, that's a lot of work. It's and a call for memory. And there were a lot of assets that I did learn and coping skills that I did learn that had some value. No, it was more than that. I think it has an adult, and I was an adult when I learned to read. We're suspended emotionally, and there are millions of adults. I've shared my story with millions of other adults. I've talked to incarcerated men and women, and our prisons are full of little boys and little girls that grew up and ended up in the prison system or the justice system. And our story is the same, with the low self-esteem and the shame and the embarrassment. And we're suspended in our childhood, emotionally, psychologically, academically, intellectually, and spiritually, in a variety of ways. But it has a horrendous impact, and illiteracy has tentacles that reach out at so many things and facets to the individual and also to our country. I mean, you think of any problem, and the good news about illiteracy or literacy and learning to read is that we now know, science tells us 97% of the people, if you can talk, you can learn to read. And there is a gap between teacher training. Teachers have not, and I'm not blaming. I want to see teachers trained in the science of teaching. And my volunteer tutor, she ended up, in retrospect, I'll use this language, as the ambulance driver that got me to the reading clinic with Pat Lindemuth, and who was a pioneer in science phonetic awareness, and I had some issues there. And they were identified and diagnosed, and they were treated. In 100 hours after I met with Pat Lindemuth, I went from the second word attack skill to the 12th grade level. So it exploded. And one of the things adults do, and John Corcoran did, was carried with him. I bought into the big lie. I bought into the lie that something was wrong with my brain. And I think we're all traumatized in childhood in a lot of different ways. But being in the dumb row and being told that I was a winner for six years and going off in school, and my first impression with school was they didn't know what my parents knew, you know, and by the time I'm in the 5th grade, I'm a behavior problem. The same, and I was disrupted. I was in front of the principal's office most of the time. I was expelled, I was suspended. And by the time I got to 8th grade, I decided I had athletic skills. I said, I'm taking the short end of this stick in school. I'm gonna change. And I'm gonna start whatever it takes. I'm gonna kiss up, I'm gonna behave. I wanted to be on the athletic field. So I maintain, and it's a true story today. If you behave yourself in high school, they'll give you a diploma. And they claim they're not, but they are. We're still passing this not this last year, but the year before that, they passed out high school diplomas to kids that were reading at the elementary school level. And so what my story did at the age of 48, I told the truth. I guarded the secret. My wife was the only person that knew I couldn't read. I taught school for 17 years in a public high school. And I want to say, as a child, I was innocent. And I don't have to apologize for anything that I did as a child. A teenager, you know, teenagers misbehave. They're a little bit on the crazy side, and then they grow up and become a little bit more civil. But as a teacher, I think I owe the Literate Society, because it's a moral dilemma for me to go, and I graduated from college also. That's another story that's a little bit different from the innocence of a little boy. Because when I went to college, I got into school on a full athletic scholarship, but I stayed in school because I found ways to navigate the system. And it wasn't the athletic department, it wasn't the coaching, it was my own deception and deceit and lies. And I had copies of exams before I took course, and I couldn't read. I couldn't write a sentence. And there's 1,000,001 stories that I could tell about every course that I ever took, and how I passed an exam book out the window, and had a friend put the answers in and passed it back to me. That was a kind of a minor thing. So that's what I did. And I lied and I cheated. And one of the nicest things about telling the truth is, and learning to read also filled a big hole in my soul. And I think America has a big hole in its soul too. And I think if America made a commitment to teach everybody to read, and America does promise an equal opportunity to everybody, and they're not keeping their promise if we're not teaching everybody to read. That's a requirement for full employment opportunities, and I think people that can read just have underestimated has underestimated the impact it has on the individual and the limited choices they have in their lives. And I just feel that we have an opportunity in America to teach the world to read. We have the science. If we close the gap between what we know, and one of the things the universities that prepare teachers are as responsible to the parents as a second grade teacher. They are not properly preparing teachers. They are passing teachers through and they're saying, go out there, you'll figure it out. And there is a science to it, to teaching reading. And,
so, John, with that, if I could ask, what was it that was different for you and how you were taught versus how you were able to learn?
I had and it's complicated, but I had a severe auditory discrimination problem. And it was identified when I went to the reading clinic. And it's in plain language. I could not, and the language, the English language is a phonetic language, and it has sounds. There is a code to it. It's like electricity, you know. If you understand that how that switch works. But with me, for example, auditory discrimination, it means I couldn't process the sounds. So if you were teaching me a sound like the sound for the letter L, it's ooh, and like my granddaughter's name is Kayla, and I pronounced her name Kaya, because I couldn't process. It's not my hearing. I couldn't process those sounds. The sound for L is la, Kayla, and so like the word, the sound for M is and your lips are closed and air comes through your nose. Well, I was taught what I was doing with my mouth, air, and so that's the big breakthrough. I was able to feel the sounds, and I couldn't process them. I still have, you know, I still can't process them, but I can feel them. And so now I have the code. There's a code for breaking the English language down. I don't think I did a very good job of explaining that to
You did, and you broke the code. You learned to not only read, but now you've started a foundation. Tell us about your foundation.
Well, the foundation its mission is to facilitate the other literacy champions out there, and there's a lot of people of goodwill working very hard to break this cycle of illiteracy, and then the mission is to prevent adult illiteracy, and you prevent it by teaching children to read. And for me, I believe it's as important to teach an adult to read in America today as it is to teach a child. And when I say adults, I mean teenagers also. We still are not. We have children that are being passed. If you don't get it by the 5th grade in school, chances are you're not going to learn to read in school. And today, still high school teachers don't think it's their job or part of their curriculum to teach kids to read. And how are they going to pass a history course if they can't read a book? And so it's when you look under the microscope, it's like, how is this happening? How does a country like America that sends a camera to Mars and sends a picture back and able to share it with the world can't break the code here? Can't teach children how to read, write, and spell, and it's something that we can really do. And to solve any problem, we have to articulate the problem, and that's what we, as you know, I mean, it's your business too, is that humans have been telling stories for thousands of years to entertain and to inform and to educate. And that's what I volunteered for when I learned to read. And I wanted to, first, I didn't want to. I had a private life. I lived in the same community. My wife was a professional. I was a professional. I didn't feel like telling that story. I was just going to keep it to myself. Matter of fact, when I told my wife they were asking me to share my story, she said, "Why don't you just shut up and read?" But the little boy in me said, "Go tell them. They'll fix it." And the teenager said, "Don't bother." They didn't fix it. They didn't care, and they don't care now. And I'm going on what the little boy said. Fix it, and tell them. Tell the big people how painful and frustrating this is, and to break the code and teach us and make that commitment, and be trained and close that gap between, for the teachers, they need to close that gap between what we know and what we do, and the universities have to be a big player here, and they're not moving.
You're listening to 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. And with that, John Corcoran with us here on the Megacast. He's an author and the president of the John Corcoran Foundation. You learned to read. You did have the courage to come forward and share your story. What's it been like for you to meet other adults that were struggling with the same problem that you went through?
We share our stories. We all think our problem was the biggest problem of all, and we had the hardest. We share that. It's almost like what I understand AA meeting is about. You gather together and you talk about it, and the only way you can get cured from illiteracy is learn to read. And once you learn to read, it's so, like I said, there's a big hole in all our souls. And in talking to other adults, they also have this passion to share their stories, and a passion to read and learn more and go to school and break the cycle. It's like I said, we are suspended in our childhood in different ways, psychologically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, academically, and we have to go back to our childhood. And it's more than just learning words. It's healing from the self-esteem and the loss of opportunity. And really, 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 what we have to do is forgive ourselves for not learning how to read, and forgive others for not teaching us how to read, and ask others that can read to share their precious gift with us and with others.
John Corcoran joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. He's the president of the John Corcoran Foundation and is also an author. And John, earlier on, you made a really interesting point that teachers, as they're being trained at the college level, are not being trained necessarily to look for these issues and find ways to solve them. So for educators at all levels, whether it be elementary, middle, high school, or higher education in the academics at the college level, what do they need to be looking out for right now? And if they have a student that is having literacy issues, whether it be just general illiteracy or because of dyslexia or a learning disability or an auditory disability, whatever the case may be, what should they be looking out for? And then what can they do to start the process of helping that student or those students solve their illiteracy issue and begin to learn to read?
I think they need to focus on the science of reading, and not be distracted by all of these other things. We now know, 30 years ago, we didn't think dyslexics could learn to read. We weren't talking a lot about it. Dyslexics with proper instruction can learn to read. And 97% of the people. So the focus has to be in even using that language of learning disability. If I would have gone to school, if I go to school today, I would have been labeled learning disabled. Okay, think about that term. The poor choice. We've outlived that term, for one thing. Learning disabled, a human being. You're so arrogant that you think another human being isn't capable of learning. And it was a poor choice of words, 50 or 60 years, and it's outlived its time. And when a teacher is thinking, John Corcoran, he must be learning disabled. Hey, I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of things about life, and I learned my timetables. I could count money before I went to school. So I think it's this attitude about all these excuses that we've created. And so I'm saying focus more on the training, teach a teacher how to teach, and in privacy, if I ask a teacher if they really know how to teach, if they were really taught at the university about the language, no, they weren't. And so in reality, I think if we concentrate on that more than any of these other sidebar issues and conversations, and quit talking about, you know what, people ask me, what about accommodations for dyslexics? They have more time or they get accommodated. You know, the only accommodation I want, and for most people that can't read, you know what the accommodation is? We want you to teach us how to decode the language. We want you to teach us how to read and comprehend what is on the printed page. And the other piece of it, my oral language skills have improved. My thought process is different. And we're talking about kids today that can't think and don't have critical minds. And literacy is part of that. Our language is all connected to that. So it's so critical that we really focus on teaching the reading piece of it. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely.
Yes.
John, I'm a huge reader, have been since I was a little girl. What's your favorite thing to read?
Well, when I first started reading, I read periodicals, short stuff. And my first novel, and I wanted to say something about you. You were blessed. You were probably one of those little people that walked by the library and got it. About 25% of the population gets that. And it takes them a while to comprehend how difficult it is for us to get it. I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum. And I think that that's an interesting phenomenon. I read a lot when I first started reading. I wanted to read about reading and how people, how the brain works. So that's a lot of it in periodicals. When I read my first novel, my little granddaughter was somebody like you, and she got it real early, 4 or 5 years old, she was reading. And I asked her one day, because we were learning to read at the same time, and I asked her, Kayla, do you see pictures when you read? And she said, of course. Well, good readers, that's what they do. And a slow reader is working on pronouncing and that was a real eye-opener, because my teacher, Pat Lindenwood, told me that once I start reading and with some fluency, I'll see the pictures in my brain. And I avoided novels because they were too complicated for me, and following the characters and everything. Now, when I read my first novel, it was such a joy, and it was a book that I was supposed to read in high school, and that was the first one. And then now I read novels, and when I can't remember people's names, I just give them new names, and follow them in the story. But novels were a little bit harder for me to read. But I love the newspaper and soft stuff, and that's 6th grade level in reality.
I still can't believe you were a teacher, and you had a driver's license. How did you pass the test to get a driver's license?
I'm a little bit older than you are, and when I went and got my driver's license, we didn't have to take written exams. Your parents drove you out to the fairgrounds, and the guy you drove around the lot, and you got your driver's license. And I got mine at 14, 15 years old. And I really didn't know how to drive when I got my driver's license. And that's, you know, some of those things are under the wire, different things were. But it's, you know, I was a teacher, and I was, had control in my environment, of my classroom. And I had aides that did my writing. They took the role for me. And by that time, I was the director of my own literacy. And I can tell you a story about being a teacher and living in fear. I mean, I was always in fear that I was going to get caught. I could manage the classroom. And I was the king of films, educational films, guest speakers. I probably still hold the record in San Diego County for guest speakers. I bring the experts
So
in.
that made you a favorite teacher, right?
Yeah, oh, sure. And we didn't have dumb rows. We had a circle, we had discussions. It was an oral environment, and I taught the way I learned. I learned by listening and talking. And,
what did you teach, by the way?
I taught social studies. I was also PE. When you're in public schools, you teach a lot of different things. But I could have locked down and this is I have a crazy story. I had a PE job. I could have stayed there. I could have locked in and not gone into the classroom. But I was bored, so I went into the classroom, and I did something. One of the things I did, when technology came around, remember where you could tape something on television, and one of the films, the Roots, was on TV. You guys remember Roots?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, that was a great piece, and I taped that. I showed that to my students, and I was pretty progressive to have a conversation about Roots at that time, and so I did some progressive things at progressive time, and I do want to say, I wasn't. Being a teacher was really a moral dilemma for me, and for other people listening to me you can have some empathy for me when I was a little boy or a teenager and I couldn't read. But as a teacher, you know, the bar is a bit higher, and I was an adult, and I made these decisions, and I can apologize for my sins, my crimes, my trespasses to the literate world for being a teacher. I don't want illiterate teachers teaching. I want teachers to know how to teach children how to read and write. As a matter of fact, I think every teacher should know how to teach a child and an adult how to read. I think before they get out of college, they should have taught, just like nurses, you know, they go into nursing, they know how to give an injection. I think teachers should know how to teach a child. Should be part of their credential.
But because of what you were going through and your struggles, did it help you identify other students that were maybe experiencing the same hidden secret that you were?
I knew, I can read them. I could tell. And even adults, you get a pretty good read on it. But, you know, if you think about the psychic, you know, I was playing defense. I was the guy that defuses bombs, you know, and you say, why would anybody defuse bombs? You know, that's risky. It could blow up and kill you, but you have confidence that you know how to do it. And what happened to me, I mean, who suspects a teacher to be illiterate? Okay, it's a pretty good place to hide. I show you one experience that I had in terms of the fear and the frustration. I hated faculty meetings because sometimes the principal, and I was a teacher when principals were actually bosses and they could tell teachers what to do. That's not so true today, but sometimes we'd have a brainstorming session in the faculty meeting. We had a faculty meeting every week or every 2 weeks, And I used to live in fear that, because the principal used to say, call on teachers in the room to say, John, put this up on the board. Let's get this down on the board, what we were talking about. And I lived in fear. And there was a podium in the room, but I couldn't always get behind that podium to hide. And I'm 6'4", so I wasn't invisible. But I always had a plan. If he said, John, get up here and do this, I would get up, take 2 steps, and drop to the floor, and I'd say, call 911. And I was always looking for, my back. And so I played defense. This is one of the really nicest things about knowing how to read and giving up your secret, giving up your deceit, giving up your lie. You don't have to be so defensive about everything, on guard. And so it has an impact on your personal relationships also. I told my wife when we were engaged that I couldn't read. She's a college graduate and she sees me as a teacher. And she just thought that I meant I didn't read much, like men sometimes would say that to a woman. And she didn't really realize how severe my issue was until I was trying to read to a child's book to our daughter, and then she realized that, and she did a lot of the writing. I couldn't write a sentence. I graduated from college and I couldn't write a sentence. It wasn't until I was probably 50 that I started writing, and I really love to write. I mean, it's a process that engages your brain, and you get to put something on a piece of paper. It's still a miracle to me when I write a sentence and I get an idea out there. It's so fantastic. And I know when you write, you better be more careful in what you say than what you say. So all of that was, I really dug deep into my psychic to understand the two dual lives that I lived, and I never lied to myself about being illiterate, and I always knew that was my problem, and I was always on guard and very careful. And there's a lot of details in my book, and a lot of secrets that I haven't really revealed, and like I say, I'm going to take them to the grave with me.
Well, we're so lucky that you've had the courage to share your story, because you've inspired other people to come forward and to take those steps and to learn to read, because it opens up your world in ways that you probably never even imagined. John, it's been great talking to you, but I'm sorry we're going to have to say goodbye. But I could talk to you all day.
Yes.
I bet you have stories. I would love to hear some of those other secrets.
All right. Well, you'll be hearing more from me.
Well, we appreciate your time. We want to let people know JohnCorcoranFoundation.org is where you need to go to learn more information about John, his fascinating story, as well as his foundation and how he is using his story to impact people even yet today. Thank you again, John, for being with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast, and when we come back, we're going to be speaking with another person that is trying to use their story to help others. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
The only way to beat COVID-19 is to face it.
You can't get too comfortable.
You can't forget the danger.
Wear the mask. Wear the mask.
Wear the mask. Wash your hands.
Keep a safe distance.
Especially in the next few months.
We'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
Someday.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But not yet.
But not yet.
Consider virtual gatherings for the holidays.
Curbside food orders.
Grocery delivery.
And shopping local. Shop local.
And especially shopping local.
Let's beat this virus. We can if we face it together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together. Together.
For the latest information, visit oakgov.com/COVID.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Perry tested positive for COVID-19. Emma was exposed to a friend who's positive. Willa's waiting on test results. After any contact with COVID-19, or if you test positive, stay home for at least 10 days. If you live with others, keep your distance and wear a mask. Help Michigan contain COVID-19. Visit michigan.gov/contain-COVID.
Great to have you back with us here on the Oakland County Megacast, the Friday edition. What a fascinating story.
Oh, amazing.
Tyler, I still can't understand how someone was a teacher for 17 years and they did not know how to read.
Yeah, John's story is really an amazing story. If you have an opportunity to go to his website and do a little bit of reading, johncorcoranfoundation.org, and read up on his story and how he has taken his journey to learn to read that late in his life to help other people, and then on top of that to bring more advocacy to that. It's really one of the most amazing stories I think we've ever been able to help somebody tell on this show and certainly on the station, because as we've come to know even more so in the pandemic, literacy is such a huge issue that has not been properly mitigated in the U.S. and really throughout the world. And as we've seen throughout history, the ability to read and write can change lives, can change generations, and only helps to build our society further and into a better direction. So the work that John has done and continues to do and advocates for is critical. And his ability to take his situation and turn it into a positive, not only for himself, but for his students and for hundreds and if not thousands of people beyond that is amazing. And I'm glad we had a chance to talk with him today.
It really does take a lot of courage to come forward and tell that story, especially when you have been a teacher on top of that. So the next person is also using her story to try to help other people. In 2016, Alexa Randolph was ready to take on the world as a recent college graduate. Then a terrible car accident sidelined her life. Excuse me, when she was diagnosed with central pain syndrome. So since then, she has been an advocate for the invisible illnesses, and she joins us now to talk about more of her journey. Thank you, Alexa, for being with us here on the Megacast.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I know we've talked to you once before. You're so young, but tell us about the accident and then your journey since the accident.
Yeah, so it was 2016, July, so right after I'd graduated in May. I was visiting family, and we were on our way home from dinner, and a lady ran a red light and T-boned us right on my car, or my side, which was the rear passenger. We got pushed like 40 feet and almost hit a gas station sign. My uncle was able to maneuver the car so we wouldn't hit it. I believe the other woman's car was totaled, and this was all from either texting and driving or distracted driving. I ended up walking away that night, not having to go to the hospital or anything. EMS had checked me out and said I was okay. A few days later, I was still just had a bad headache where I got hit and just dizzy and nauseous. So we saw my uncle's doctor, who told me it was just a sinus infection. I might have been getting one and it made it come out. I thought it was kind of weird, but he was the doctor. I ended up coming home, and went to see my doctor, who I was told it was just depression, and I had neck issues, so I went to see a chiropractor. 4 months later, I was still in a lot of pain and I was having trouble concentrating. I finally got to see a neurologist who told me it was a concussion and post-concussion syndrome.
So, Alexa, if I could stop you there.
Yeah.
If they had properly diagnosed you earlier, would you have been able to mitigate some of the ongoing issues you've had?
Probably, because they would have probably had me do certain, like I flew a week after the accident. I don't know if I would have been allowed to do that had it been told. I'm sure there were steps and stuff for concussions, but I don't know. I would think so, though.
Wow. So since then, what has your life been like since then?
It's been really hard. I'm in constant pain 24/7 all over my body. It's like a burning sensation. I get like stabbing pains, and it sometimes feels like it's like the boy who cried wolf, because I don't know, like if I have arm pain or if I have pain, sometimes it's hard to know if there's like an actual injury or if it's my central pain, like my nerves doing it. So there were times like I had fallen and hurt my shoulder, but they were saying like my central pain was making it worse, where in actuality, I actually broke my shoulder and had a broken shoulder for 10 months and I dealt with it.
That just seems so crazy. So Alexa Randolph with us here on the Megacast. She's the founder of the Alexa Randolph LLC, but you also are an advocate for the invisible illness. So with that, do they feel like you're making it up? And is that a hard argument to have with people?
Yes, that is huge. I've had doctors telling me it was all in my head, that I was making this up. I've had people like asking me, like, are you really that sick? I have a handicap sticker and people look at me all the time because I look healthy on the outside. I look normal. I look like nothing's wrong with me. And the truth is there's a lot wrong. You just can't see it. It's not like my arm got cut off.
Right, so you're dealing with central pain syndrome. I know that coming up is the Rare Disease Day, and one of the reasons you're here with us today is to kind of talk about that, to bring awareness to some of these issues so that we're not so judgmental in society.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, and that's actually, I think, on Sunday. I actually work with the Mental Health Collection, and we put on these mental health Zoom events. And so for our March event, which is next Thursday, March 4th at 8 p.m., it's on Zoom. We're actually focusing on chronic illness and chronic pain in regards to mental health, all in for Rare Disease Day.
So with that, Alexa, do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm 26.
So what is, are you able to work right now?
Not really. I can't really do much. I still have bad pains in my head, and I actually can't even concentrate a lot. I can do little bits of things, couple hours a day, but it's really difficult.
So with that, dealing with the physical pain, how is your mental health during this time? Because you were a recent graduate ready to take on the world.
Yeah, and I had actually worked full time for about 6 months in between, like right after it happened, like when I was just told it was depression until I got told it was a concussion. So about like 6 months I actually did work full time, but it was really difficult because every time they told me to do something, all of a sudden my brain, I couldn't remember what it was. And I didn't know at the time it was a head injury. So, and I just thought something just didn't seem right.
So what's your day-to-day like right now?
Just honestly, like kind of depends on the day. I've been trying to do a little bit more meditation and journaling to try and kind of get me in a better place, especially because there really is no medication or treatment. So just trying to make myself feel better as mentally as I can kind of sometimes can help with the pain a little bit. It's just
I'm sorry. What's it been like for you to share your story and go public, though? What's been the reaction from the general public once they hear your story?
Honestly, it's been truly amazing. Part of me sometimes, in this weird way, it's like I'm almost thankful for my story because I've been able to help so many people. And I've heard so many people's stories that people I knew and I didn't know they had anything going on just because they looked normal or they looked healthy or they didn't talk about it. And now more and more people are coming out and sharing stories. And that's like the one reason I have my podcast. It's because I want people to feel like they have that voice.
Tell us more about your podcast.
Yeah, my podcast is called With Love Alexa. It can be found on Apple, Spotify, pretty much everywhere you would get a listen to your podcast. It's just all about invisible illness. I bring on people to talk about mental health, chronic pain, chronic illness, but also just living their best life, really like diving deep into people's stories. And I've had some amazing guests I've had some reality TV stars from Bachelor and Big Brother. I've also had Real Housewives. I've had athletes. I've had just your everyday people. I've had professionals, just anyone that has a story. It should come out.
Alexa Randolph with us here on the Megacast. She is with the Invisible Illness Advocate. And with that, what are you hoping to be able to do with your podcast? What's next for you?
My goal is to eventually take it to public speaking. I did a little bit before the pandemic. I actually spoke at my old high school. They were doing like a mental health day. And I spoke to about 5 or so mental health or the health classes. And it was truly amazing. Like, I think high school, even middle school and college are some of the best places to speak because these kids and adults are growing and they're learning. So I would love to continue to do more speaking and to use like my platform just to get as much out there as I can.
Because when with that too, do you think it's probably, it's easier for them to receive that message because it's you sharing your story and not someone that is maybe 75 or 80 that they can't relate to because you are so young?
I think so, and I think it can help just in general because we know our bodies so much better than anyone else. And I used to always think the doctor, the professional always knew best, and I always listened. And not that they're wrong, but they don't know everything. And they don't really study chronic pain or how to deal with that necessarily in medical school, which they should. So I think listening to someone like me who's really going through something can really help others, even if it's caregivers or just people that have never experienced it. I think listening to someone.
What's your support circle like?
It's truly been amazing from the start. I have my parents who I couldn't be more grateful for. They have been my biggest advocates and never once judged me or told me I was making this up. They've just been a constant fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. They're always there behind me, coming to all of my events or just being there as much as they can. And my friends have honestly been amazing too.
Do you have to take any types of medication, or are you just trying to manage your pain at this point?
At this point, it's just more managing. I've been on all the different medications and honestly nothing works right now. It's just going to see my doctors, and maybe one day they'll have a new idea that something just comes out. The meditations helped a little bit because it helps to calm my mind. And honestly, a lot of these events that we've been hosting these Zoom mental health have really been truly helpful to me. Just seeing how it's affected so many people.
Alexa Randolph joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. She is the founder of Alexa Randolph LLC, and is an invisible illness advocate. And you talk about these mental health events and how it's helped you with your chronic pain and with the mental health repercussions of your chronic pain. How has it helped the people that you have been joined by on these monthly talks, and those that are participating by viewing, whether it is live or participating after the fact? How have you noticed, or have you been told by others that has helped them on their journey as well?
Yeah, I've actually been told that it's changed a few people's lives. Like we recently had one on race. That was our last event in February, and it was talking about race and mental health. And a few people that have come, I've heard from other people saying that it changed their mindset on things, that they were going through a hard time, and being able to speak on this or to be a part of it, it's just completely changed them, just like in a snap. It's incredible, and people just keep coming back, the same people and new people, but it really warms my heart.
Well, it's great that you're able to share your story and willing to share your story as well to help other people throughout this time as well. What's it been like for you during the pandemic?
It's been hard, just because we're basically stuck at home. I think in the beginning it wasn't as bad for me because I was kind of used to having to stay home. It could be a week at a time, just because of my pain. So to me, originally it really wasn't as severe, but I think the mental aspect of not being able to see all my friends and not being able to do, it's been really hard. But on the flip side, my business has done really well. I've been able to reach out to so many people because of this. So it's been good and bad.
Well, we've seen some amazing medical miracles in this world. It is incredible what they're doing with the science and advancing medicine here in the United States and across the country. Are you hopeful that they'll find a solution for you?
I hope so. And if not in my lifetime, I hope it's in the next generation's lifetime.
Well, we hope it's in your lifetime as well. Alexa Randolph
nice.
with us here on the Megacast. Alexa, quickly give us your website if people want to find out more about you.
Yeah, it's just www.alexarandolph.com. I can be emailed at alexa@alexarandolph.com as well.
And I know that you also sell products on your website. And again, when is the talk coming up, the Zoom talk?
Yeah, it's actually next Thursday, March 4th. It's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Zoom. If you want to participate, just email me and I will send you the Zoom link.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. It's always great talking to you, and we wish you the best, and we hope that they do find a solution for your problem. A medical miracle we're wishing for you.
Thank you, and I just want to say that each and every one of us are all forever strong.
There you go. Alexa Randolph with us on the Megacast. We're going to take a quick break here on the show.
Hi, my name is Kurt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Park's COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
As rivals, we don't always see eye to eye.
Like who scored the best recruits?
Who's gonna be who?
And whether we wear green or blue.
But one thing we can all agree on to help stop the spread of COVID-19. Wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Wear a mask.
The ball's in your court, Michigan.
Welcome back to the Friday edition of the Megacast. I'm Ronnie Dahl here in the studios alongside Mr. Tyler Keefe, and a few technical issues on the radio side of the house.
Yeah, just some slight technical issues, it seems. really, it looks like it's a regional thing just in this local area surrounding Green Media Center. It hasn't so far affected us in the studio here. I won't say that too loud, but yeah, some issues on the physical radio side on Lakes FM. So if you are with us, congratulations. If you're not, we will get you with us on the replays. The Biff is still with us, and our TV stations, Civic Center TV and WBTV, are still with us. But going strong, we'll have this all in the replay for you on our website, civiccentertv.com. And when we're back up on all outlets regularly this afternoon after we do some troubleshooting, we will have all of this in its entirety for you uninterrupted.
Well, it is Friday, Tyler, and one of the things that we always like to do in our house, order pizza.
Good
on
idea.
Friday, because my husband works from home. I usually don't want to cook by Friday night, so it is a good night to do that. And I'll tell you what, the perfect person to talk to us about pizza right now, Melody Baetens with us here on the Megacast. She's a restaurant critic and reporter for the Detroit News. Thank you for being with us as usual.
Thanks for having me.
So you just did a big story about pizza. How many slices of pizza have you eaten over the past few days?
Luckily, we just got small pizzas for this big piece I did for the Detroit News, and they were Detroit style. So, a small is literally 4 slices a lot of times. So there wasn't too much there wasn't too much of a pizza mountain to climb.
I will say,
yeah.
I judged it was like one of these judges at like a pizza thing, I don't know, farmer's market somewhere, and I was so sick of pizza by the end of the night. It was like 30 different kinds of pizza. And in the beginning you start out eating like full pieces, and then by the end you're like, half a bite. So what did you find? What even made you want to do this, by the way?
So I wrote a story on Detroit style pizza, which is a specific, kind of pizza. It was developed here in back in the last century in the 40s and the 50s, and has really grown nationally. Detroit style pizza is square pizza where the cheese goes to the crust, to the edge. A lot of times the sauce is ladled on top, so it's not tucked under the cheese, which kind of protects the dough and keeps it really airy and light. And it's just been gaining in popularity. Yelp released a 2021 trend report that had literally said Detroit style pizza is going national, and it's pointed to like a 56% increase in searches for Detroit style pizza, or reviews that said Detroit style pizza. Also, Pizza Hut came out with their own version of our city's pizza, and there's a national brand that has many locations. I think they're one of the biggest pizza brands in the country. And we're also just seeing more Detroit-style pizzerias open in places like New York, Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh. A place called Via 313 just opened in Austin. There's Blue Pan in Denver. So it's really spreading out. And at the same time, this year, 2021, is the 75th anniversary of Buddy's in Detroit at Conant and 6 Mile, where it kind of all started. So
if you go to Buddy's, you have to go to the original Buddy's.
Absolutely. But they've got 19 locations now, so they've really spread out through Michigan, over the last 75 years. So I kind of dug into the history of what makes Detroit-style pizza, where it originated, who were the players, and then talked about, its growing popularity. Even in Detroit, there's a lot of new pizzerias. Michigan and Trumbull's a great example. Grandma Bob's not too far from them, both in Corktown. Como's in Ferndale is a completely new restaurant than it was, a couple years ago. They've got a great example of Detroit-style pizza. So yeah, it was really cool to dig into the history of the square pizza and how it kind of, we used to just call it square pizza, but lately it's been Detroit's own style, and I really think it holds up to New York slices and Chicago's deep dish, and I think we'll be hearing more about it, especially this year as Buddy's celebrates 75 years.
Okay, local controversy, Melody. You mentioned Detroit. You mentioned Detroit style. You then mentioned how it compares to other styles like New York style, and then you mentioned Chicago style. A little controversy around Chicago style and a debate of whether or not it is pizza or some other concoction that is pizza adjacent. What is your opinion on Chicago style? Is it pizza or is it fake?
Oh, I think it's definitely its own style of pizza. I think pizza has a lot to do with the sauce and the dough. And so long as they're making fresh dough and, putting good sauce on it, I think everything else is open to interpretation. And so, yeah, I think it's pizza. I mean, it's almost a lasagna. Some people call it a pizza casserole. But yeah, it's pizza. It's got sauce, cheese, and good base dough, crusty bread at the bottom, and that's what you need for pizza.
What's one of the most surprising things you discovered in writing this piece?
I think that I kind of knew, but I didn't realize how intertwined everything was. Gus Guerrero opened Buddy's in 1944. He started selling pizza there in 1946. And then he sold it just a couple years later. And when he sold it to these guys that were known as the two Jimmys, Big Jimmy and Little Jimmy, they owned Buddy's for a couple years, and they hired this guy named Louis. And Gus, who founded Buddy's, taught Louis how to make this style pizza. Then Gus went on to open Cloverleaf in East Point, which was called East Detroit back then. And then Louis left Buddy's after a couple of years when they sold it again, and he went down the street to Shields and started making Detroit-style pizza there. And then after a couple of years, he opened his own pizzeria in Hazel Park, which we know is Louis', one of the best Detroit-style pizzerias in Metro Detroit, and his grandson Nicholas still owns Louis today. So it's all connected, and a lot of it happened. A lot of it happened in the 70s, of the moving around and the spreading around of the pizza.
I've never tried Louis'. Was there a little bit of rivalry at all between them when they were selling and reopening and moving around?
I think that there might have been, but the story that's told now is pretty fair, and everyone's just happy to be selling pizza still after decades and decades. I talked to Gus Guerrero's his daughter Marie for the story. She and her brother Jack still run Cloverleaf in East Point. They have several locations for carryout around town, and they're just, they know that Buddy's is considered the original, but the Buddy's gives credit to their dad as well. So it's a multifaceted history, all revolving around this square pizza. It was pretty fun to research.
So recently we had Dave Portnoy in town who went around and was doing all of these pizza taste tests, which he's kind of known for. Did you watch some of the videos?
Yes, I did. And I talked to Freddie in Melvindale, Freddie the Pizza Man. I interviewed him. He was overwhelmed after Barstool Sports came and they gave him a great review, and he's still just trying to keep up with orders. He told me, he makes his dough overnight. The reason his pizza is so good is because he spends so much time on the dough. It has to be made at a certain time. It has to have a certain amount of time in the fridge. It has to rise for a certain amount of time. So he can't just, when he runs out, whip up another batch. He really has to, take the time and plan it out. So when he runs out, he's out. And he was happy, especially since it was an opportunity for him to raise some money for his autism charity, which is, I believe, also called Freddie the Pizza Man. And he hopes that he can get pizza in the hands of everyone that wants one, because it really was a shock to his business, and lines out the door early in the morning. So you might have to be patient if we want a slice of Freddie's for a while.
But I do love that story because he's kind of a one-man show there, but also his nonprofit work that he is doing, and it lifted him. It lifted his story, but I felt like it also gave a little bit of positivity to the Detroit area, which we need right now, especially after the American Lafayette Coney Island debacle and the city citing them. So we needed some love right now.
Yeah, it was a good, it was fun to watch some of those videos and see the reaction. And, he takes one bite and then the pizzeria is busy for the next week at least.
But on top of that, we are still in the middle of the pandemic, and so many other restaurants are struggling. How has it been for the pizza joints? Do they survive? Because it's more of a carry-out food for a lot of people.
It's a great question. with the carryout being a big thing, pizza is very, it holds up to being delivered, to being carry out, even to being frozen and shipped across the country. But we are in a pandemic, and I did ask buddies in Cloverleaf how it's been, and they said overall, while there's been ups and downs as indoor dining opens and closes, they're down about 25 to 30% for in 2020 compared to 2019. So hopefully this year will be a little more stable for them, and for all restaurants as well, because we are still seeing the effects. Even though we're open at 25% now, it's not a lot, and I think we're going to see some more restaurants close as we did last year.
Yeah, it appears as if the governor is not going to be reducing those restrictions anytime soon. I think they're going to at least be through St. Patrick's Day, which is such a popular time for so many of these restaurants. So what else is happening kind of on the restaurant beat? Anything opening, new restaurants during this time?
Yeah, amazingly, there are a lot of different kinds of restaurants that are preparing to open. I'm seeing some delays. Places that were hoping to be open by March are now saying April, which is to be expected anyway, but especially during a pandemic when supply chains can be interrupted and construction and city offices, approving things. But we are going to see some new restaurants opening up. One I'm really excited about is in downtown Detroit. It's called the Detroit Beer Exchange. And this is a sister location to their original in Kalamazoo. And it's a beer hall, but the prices are all kind of done like the stock market, where if a beer is not selling well, the price might be cheaper, or if a beer is really popular that day, they might raise the price. And they have this proprietary technology that keeps track of it all. And so the prices ebb and flow, and they might have like a bust or a bubble, and like all the prices might, dip for a happy hour or something like that. They're going to have, this is on Washington, just walking distance from like the Fox Theater and Comerica Park over there. They're going to have a pizzeria inside, and there's also a game room, and then the bar and restaurant. So I don't know exactly when they're opening, but I think that's going to be a fun one for downtown, especially as we get into baseball season. I think that's going to be a big attraction.
What is on your must-eat list right now?
Oh, geez. Well, not pizza, because I'm kind of over it.
Right. So Pino's, though, did their new one finally open? I think they were opening one over there in the New Center area. Did it open yet?
They're open for carryout. They opened this week for carryout. Also a New Center, I really want to get over to Bob Fair. That's a African restaurant and market that just opened a week or so ago. I think they're open for carryout, maybe some dine-in. They also have their own brand of juice and hot sauce. So I definitely want to get in there and check them out. I also recently popped into Great Lakes Pot Pie Company. Yeah, Great Lakes Pot Pies in Clawson down 14 Mile. A friend told me about it, and they have ready to pop in the oven chicken pot pies, meatball pot pies, and quiches, and try it out. It's really good. If you're looking for dinner but don't want to cook but want something freshly made in the oven, it's a good option.
That sounds really yummy.
Yeah, it was. The chicken pot pie was...
And better, too, because there's the one that you can get from Costco. I don't know if you've ever had it, Tyler, but you go and it's like $20, but it's like humongous. So unless we're having a brunch party or something, which we don't do anymore because we don't have people over to the house, my husband and I are eating chicken pot pie for like days. And then you're so sick of it. You're like, I cannot eat pot pie any longer. So how long do you think some of these restaurants can survive the way they're going without the restrictions being at least lifted to 50%?
I think it depends on if we'll see some more grants from the government, the state or federal. I think if there's more help coming, then some of them will survive. It depends on the restaurant, honestly. Some of them have been doing okay with carryout only, but some of them are really about the dine-in experience, and it's really about sitting there and the wine list and being inside the space that was created for this reason, for dine-in. So I think this week we saw 2 restaurants announce they were closing, the Andiamo Dearborn and the Novi Library Sports Pub, which has been a Novi for 25 years. I talked to the owner there, and he just said after a year of bleeding, he just can't take any more loss, and he's just going to close. Their location in West Bloomfield will stay open, so he will still have a bar and restaurant, but 25 years is a long time, and I'm sure that was a really hard decision for him, but he said they are used to catering to big groups in Novi, and they really can't do that right now. He also said staffing was a problem, so their last day is going to be, I believe, the last Sunday in March.
Melody Baetens with us here on the Megacast. She's the restaurant critic and reporter for the Detroit News. I've been out to some restaurants, high-end and dive bars, and on both sides, it seems, let's just say that 25% capacity limits being loosely followed. Are you seeing that as you've been out and about? Because for some of these restaurants, they're saying, I'll risk a fine at this point in time. I need to try to make some money.
We're definitely seeing restaurants taking the risk. I think every week the Michigan Liquor Control Commission releases a batch of places that they've slapped with temporary suspensions for not following the rules, whether it be for social distancing, capacity, or masks. So I think you're right. I think places are, some of them are, asking for forgiveness rather than permission. And also the rules are, at first the rules were kind of vague, where it was like 25 capacity indoors. There was the curfew, but people weren't sure if they had to shut down outdoor capacity before the curfew, and there was a lot of questions at first. And I think people, these restaurants are just trying to do their best to keep their employees busy and keep afloat. Some of them are thriving, some of them are just doing okay, and some of them, like we saw this week, will decide to close. I think we'll lose more restaurants as the spring goes on.
You know what's been one of the confusing things is who is doing the fining? Is it the, MIOSHA? Is it your local health department? Which one is issuing a fine that could get you to lose your liquor license versus just a citation for maybe not following some of the rules or, staying open later than that 10 p.m. curfew?
I'm seeing the MLCC, the Liquor Control Commission, because that's one tool they have. Is if they suspend your liquor license, that's a huge way to make money for a lot of these restaurants. And you have to go to a hearing and get it sorted out, and there's usually a fine. And that's just they're sending people in and they're busting them for breaking one rule or the other. And I think there's been a couple dozen since September that they've slapped a fine on or a temporary suspension. And it's all over Michigan.
Melody Baetens with us. She's a Detroit News restaurant critic and reporter joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. And on that note, Melody, obviously these restaurants want to remain COVID safe. They've been doing their best to do that throughout this pandemic, but they are also really struggling to stop the bleeding of their pocketbooks and keep their employees employed. With that, and with the restaurant limits being capacity limits being something that the governor has said earlier on in the week in her press conferences is not likely to be one of the next restrictions to be loosened. What are the restaurants' thoughts on the capacity limits? Because obviously 25% is a very low mark. They've already expressed frustration with that. Wanting to remain COVID safe, where do they see a safe capacity limit being limited, that they could be open at a partial capacity and still maintain a safe environment?
I think their thoughts are as varied as, people in Michigan's thoughts. Some of them are like, there's a pandemic, we need to follow the rules, we understand, we're going to do our best, but you need to help us monetarily survive or we're not going to. And others are like, no one's gotten sick, we don't understand why we have to, have this low capacity when the numbers are low. So it varies, because I've talked to a lot of different types of restaurant owners, people that work in restaurants, and their attitudes are as different as people on the street that you talk to. But I will say that the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association, which is an advocacy group for the restaurant owners, they really want to see a plan set out by the state government that follows the COVID numbers as they go down or as vaccination rates go up. They want to be able to see restaurants open back up, because there really isn't, there's metrics.
It does appear we have lost our connection with Melody, or it's frozen up. We got almost all the way, Ronnie, without that becoming an issue. I know we had some instability with our connection earlier. We'll maintain it. We'll keep looking and seeing if Melody does come back. But we only got about a minute left in the program today before we have to say goodbye. So hopefully we'll get Melody back in the next 30 seconds or so, be able to say goodbye. But other than that, it's probably, looks like we have lost our Zoom connection, so it's probably just a good time to put a cap on the week and call it a day, Ronnie.
What a way to end the show. But I will say one of the interesting things that we'll keep watching here when it comes to the restaurant, some of the lawsuits that have been filed to try to force the state to allow for reopening, or at least further reopening, or to give the restaurant some compensation. So that's going to be interesting to see how that continues to play out in the court system over the next few months, because the eminent domain argument is a very interesting argument, also the compensation argument. So we'll continue to watch those, as we are one of the few states left, definitely within our Midwest region, with the restrictions still in place and that 10 p.m. curfew with that 25% capacity. But with that, it's been an interesting week here, Tyler. We want to say thank you to the entire team, Larry, Jake, Eugene, everyone behind the scenes for helping us get the show on each and every day. Everyone out there, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a happy weekend. This is the Oakland County Megacast.